So you're joining us from Ohio, and your book is called Wisdom Warriors. But I just thought your bio was really interesting when you said your father was from Sierra Leone, and
Yes.
you were the second of 11 children.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit
Wow.
about that before we get into your book.
Well, I'm the second of 11 children, and when I was 15, social services came to our house and took us away, and we were all placed in foster homes. My parents were charged with neglect. They just couldn't afford to take care of us, so we were on welfare most of my childhood.
Oh, okay.
And
Were
my
you
mother,
all put in homes together, or were you separated?
no, we were separated, two to each home, but the first 4 were put in a pre-placement center, which generally places kids within a couple of months, but we ended up being there for a year. And then there weren't any group homes for me at the time. I was age 15. So they ended up putting me in a delinquent home.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds very challenging.
It was very challenging.
What is your name? That's what someone asked.
Mary
Cole
Cole Watson.
Watson. So we can just see the M and Watson, but her name is Mary and then Cole, C-O-L-E.
Yes.
Watson.
Yes.
So
and,
how do you?
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just wondering. With an experience like that growing up, how do you overcome something like that?
To be very honest with you, my books. I was in love with books from the time I could read. I found the life that I wanted in books. I found the family that I wanted, the friends that I wanted, the adventures that I wanted. Anything I wanted, I could absorb from a book. And
wow.
I'm absolutely in love with, I just learned so much from books. They were my everything.
So you actually became a reader at a young age, and it kind of stuck with you.
I learned to read, well, I learned to read at around 5, but once I learned, I just never stopped. And at the age of 6, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I would force my brothers and sisters to play school, and I'd pass out papers, and I'd mark their papers, and I'd give them tests. So I knew exactly what I wanted to be. When you have your purpose, when you know what your purpose is, there's a joy that comes with that kind of, put a shadow over any of the darkness that happened in my life. I was in love with teaching, and my students gave me so much.
Well, I see you taught at all levels. Now, even in the face of everything you went through, you were able to go to college and get your degree in African and African American studies.
Yes.
Beautiful.
So that's amazing. Some of that's why determination will take you far.
Yes.
Yes.
A lot of people don't realize how important determination is in life.
Well, you actually inspired somebody. Wanda Herbert Romaine says that when she was 8, she wanted to be a teacher. She said, "M. Watson, you're fabulous."
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So when you went to the SUNY College, then you also got your master's degree in early childhood education.
Yes, and this is where affirmative action, if it wasn't for affirmative action, I wouldn't be sitting here. Wow. Affirmative action paid for my undergraduate school. Well, my first year, the delinquent home paid for it. And then after that, my grades were fabulous. And so I received grants through affirmative action. And then my very favorite professor gave me a really great great recommendation to go to the grad school that he went to. And so I was accepted on a graduate assistantship, a full graduate assistantship, which it took a year. It was full-time for a year. It was a really fabulous experience.
So you've basically done almost everything in education,
Yes, I
except
became,
being a principal. Have you been a principal? Because you didn't
no,
put that
not
in
a
there.
principal, but
Okay,
I,
but you've done just about it. Talk about some of the different roles you've played in as an educator.
okay, I was a director of reading for the entire district of Cleveland Heights, University Heights. I had 13 teachers under me. I had to supervise a reading summer school for elementary school students. And I taught reading at the high school level for most of my career, actually. But I also taught reading on the elementary level, as well as straight elementary school for a few years. And I taught middle school as well.
What do
Okay.
you feel are the challenges when it comes to inspiring our young people to learn?
Okay, first of all, the major challenge is structural racism, which people don't spend a lot of time thinking about where kids are concerned. And I say that because just recently, a couple months ago, the Pediatric Society of Infectious Disease said that structural racism is more traumatic to African American kids more than any infectious disease, including COVID-19. And so in my entire career as a teacher, I saw the students had such low self-esteem. And the new book out by Isabel Wilkerson, which talks about caste, says
Right.
that 1 out of every 3 African Americans has anti-bias against themselves. And so that's a very serious issue, which because it's traumatic, it derails the education of the young people. It's hard to focus on your education when you are experiencing the trauma of structural racism, whether it be a biased teacher. And sometimes parents trying to be helpful, they'll say to their kid, you know, they know they have to bring their kids up to be strong. So they'll say, like, you know, just deal with it. That's just, you know, that's just life. But that's unfair to say to kids, because kids are supposed to be joyful. And most kids are treated very special. And African American kids deserve to be treated just as special as anybody else. And when we tell them to just get on with their, you know, life and do what is expected of them, we're asking them to do what adults can't do. And then when they don't succeed and they act out, we wonder why they're acting out, instead of dealing with the adults that may be impacting their lives in a negative way.
Right,
Mhm.
right. It's a
Right.
slippery slope.
Part of the structural racism is that the expectations of Black children are so low at an early age. So they're not challenged, they're not
Right.
expected, they're not encouraged to be smart.
That's
You know,
right.
they're not, and then they end up getting put in lower performing classes, not
Yeah.
because of the intelligence. Some
Right.
of it is the teachers don't want to deal with them. They don't want to challenge them in a positive way. Some of the kids are bored and acting out. And if you
Right.
dismiss a child at 5 or 6 years old in terms of what they can achieve, then they're never going to, I mean, it would be very difficult, not impossible, but
Right.
very difficult.
But
Right,
very difficult.
right. And I feel like when you give a child a bad grade or separate them, things like that, you're really putting a Band-Aid on the situation. You're not actually solving the
Right.
problem. My
Right.
daughter went through, I mean, right now she's a junior in college and she's doing very well, but she's going to actually graduate a semester early. But she had struggles in high school, not because she couldn't learn,
Right.
but because she was dealing with so many other things, and the teachers were not addressing that. I had to wind up taking her out of that school and we were in another country at the time, and I wound up sending her back to the United States, and she started going to actually a predominantly African American school, and the teachers there just took a different approach, and
Right.
that's when she really started
Right.
to catch on, and she started doing better. So many times we have to find out what these kids are going through emotionally or deep down. Just giving a bad grade isn't actually going to solve the problem. They're not going to be motivated that way.
Right. Exactly. And because of the society we live in, kids know that we're devalued. They say that kids know racial differences as young as age 3.
Yes.
Even though
Yes.
we hear a lot of adults say, oh, kids don't see color. Yes, they
Yes,
do.
they do.
They do.
They do. And what they see is being treated differently
Exactly.
than someone else of a
Exactly.
different color. Most of the time it's a white child. But
Exactly.
and children learn racism very early. It's unfortunate that they do, but my daughter went to, for middle school, she went to a predominantly white school. From K through 6, she was at private schools, but they were predominantly Black private schools. But
Mhm.
they didn't go past the 6th grade. So once she was going to 7th, 8th, and above, we put her in a school that was predominantly white. And then one of her friends was at the school, so we were thinking it was okay. But the challenge was, and these were wealthy kids. The kids were already racist in 7th grade.
Absolutely.
They would say things
Right.
that were just completely
Because it's
inappropriate or
learned
racist.
in the household.
Yeah, and they're getting it from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so the attitude, so now the teachers were fine, but the kids spent a lot of time with the kids. That's where you really, a lot of it, where you experience the racial attitudes
Right.
with the kids. It wasn't in my daughter's case. The teachers were actually really, really good. There was no racial incident with the teachers, although there was a history teacher that had never heard of the movie Roots. So yeah, a history teacher. So for Black History Month, my daughter was going to bring the Roots movie. We had it in the DVDs. She was going to bring it so the other kids could learn something, but the teacher wouldn't allow her to do that.
Wow.
Mhm.
So she ended up going for high school. She went to this multiracial school, but what happened in high school was she was very smart. So she was in advanced classes and what's the dual credit classes. Even though the school was about 40% Black, the people in the advanced classes were either Asian
Right.
or like Middle Eastern.
Right.
Right.
And the Black kids were in average or below average classes. And in her, like the same little group of Black kids were in all of her classes. Like it was about 5 Black kids that were in, and this school is 40% Black. But in the advanced classes, there were 5 of them that were in all the same classes. And the rest, the boys didn't seem to really excel academically, and they were more steered towards sports. See, a lot of this, the race, what you were talking about, the structural racism, is where they steer you.
Right.
It's where they
Which is
steer the kid.
which is what my book is about.
Okay, and that's a good segue. So
Okay.
talk about what's actually in your book, Wisdom
Okay.
Warriors.
Okay. There's 22 short stories in Wisdom Warriors, and Wisdom Warriors is told from the standpoint of the grandparents who are the elders. The elders are supposed to impart wisdom on their granddaughter Sky, and by imparting their wisdom, they're warriors. And Sky becomes a warrior of resilience and strong cultural pride because of the teachings of her grandparents. And her grandparents happen to be my husband and I, okay? And we both majored in African American history. And it transformed our lives so much that we supplemented what we did in our careers with our learnings from our brilliant professors from Brockport State University. My husband is a guidance counselor, and so he would have groups of young kids, and he'd have these different activities to transform their self-esteem. We both felt very passionate about developing self-esteem through cultural experiences. And we were both very successful at doing that. And so the stories, if I could, culture, low school performance, there's colorism, African American History Month. African American History Month, even though I love all of my stories, African American History Month is my very favorite, because I found that African American History Month was devalued throughout my entire teaching career, to the extent that it was celebrated mostly with a feast of food. Well, we all know we can cook, okay? So, and then there would be some assemblies, but what I noticed was a lot of the teachers would opt not to take their students to African American history assemblies, but they made sure all of the students would attend the Jewish Holocaust assemblies. And those were wonderful assemblies, but it was, the students knew that it was discriminatory to tell them that they couldn't go to their African American history assemblies. And so what I decided to do with that story, I made African American History Month incredibly special, to the point that when the assembly is done for African American History Month in the story, Sky leaves the school building to get into the car, and she just cries. And as she's crying, I'm crying as I'm writing that story, because she is so overwhelmed with joy because of the cultural pride she felt from the assembly where all kids had to go. And it was just such a knowledgeable assembly. And then I end my book with 28 lessons for African American students. And that had to do with the fact, with the same notion that African American History Month it actually should, it's important for everybody. African American history is American history. But yes, what I did in my 28 lessons, I created these lessons because I wanted students to have a guide, so that if their schools weren't celebrating African American History Month, they would have something every single day that would guide them. They could either journal about it or have a discussion about it. And so that is a very important part of my 28 of my Wisdom Warriors book. There's also stories about stereotypes, poverty, student careers, racial profiling, reading, police, and I could go on. All of the topics are very timely. All of the topics are very important. And I need to interject at this time that I've always wanted to write a book for children, but I wasn't sure what type of book I wanted to write. I just knew that it needed to be something that was made a difference. And so 2 years ago, when I was teaching part-time in a high school, charter school, a young lady interrupted one of my lessons. And she said to me, Mrs. Watson, you need to write stories to make kids feel good about themselves the way you make us feel good about ourselves. And so it was because of that young lady's plea that I wrote, it was an epiphany. I realized at that very moment that those were the types of stories that I was supposed to write about. And so that young lady is responsible for this book, Wisdom Warriors.
Okay, well, so sometimes we can be inspired by others to write books, that's for sure. I can say that for certain.
So your 28 lessons, were these ones that you basically did yourself or came
Yes.
up with yourself, or did you talk with other educators?
No, they were all lessons I came up with by myself. It came about because my husband was sponsoring a family reunion, and I wanted to do something special for the kids. And so I said to my husband, I want to do something. We should do something besides, just have our, having our feast and our dancing and all of that fun. And he said, well, why don't you think of something? And so the next day, again, it was just an epiphany. I just came up with this idea. Okay, African American History Month is so special to me. Why don't I come up with 28 ideas that could guide young people?
One for
And
each day.
I have to be honest. The first day, the 14 just flowed, and then I said, oh, I don't want to get right on the clock. And the next day, the other 14 just flowed. And actually, these lessons were printed in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. A reporter, I contacted the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and the reporter called me the very next day and told me she felt that they were profound and that she wanted them in the Sunday paper that would reach more people. And so those lessons were printed in the paper.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Awesome.
And that's from you reaching out to the paper.
Right.
You reached out to them to let them know. Sometimes those media outreaches can bear fruit.
Yeah.
You just never
It
know.
can be tricky. Now you do have a comment from Jean King Battle. Do you know her?
I love Jean King. She's a dear friend.
Oh, well, she said, thank you, Mary Cole Watson, for being the wonderful and dedicated educator that you have always been. Your passion for our African-American children has been a true blessing to many.
Oh, wow. I love her. Love her.
Oh,
Yeah.
And we have a couple of comments. Teresa Russell said, we all see color much as it's denied.
Oh,
like some people will say, I don't see color. They're lying.
yeah.
I mean, unless you're blind, unless you are actually blind, meaning you lost your eyesight, you can't avoid, you have to see a person's color. That's part of who they are.
Right.
And to me, when someone says that, I don't want you to deny my color. So you saying you don't see color is like you don't see me. So that's not
right.
a positive. That's somebody trying to, lying to themselves.
In one of my stories that deals with a prejudiced teacher, the teacher says that to the parent when she went to Sky's parent when she comes in to have a conference with her. She tells the mother that she doesn't see color, and so the mother the mother lets her know, says to her, then you don't see your Black students.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
So there's a solution to all of my stories, okay? Because I want kids to feel resilient and joyful instead of hopeless.
Well, I read something recently, a statistic that I didn't know was the case, and it was like 80% of teachers are white, females.
Yes.
And I didn't know that before,
Yes.
that it was that high.
Yes.
When you have in a lot of these cities, you have large minority student populations, and some of them have very few Black teachers.
Right.
Well, what I learned when I was in the military, there's a program called Troops to Teachers. And what it happens is it's a program that helps transitioning soldiers who want to pursue careers in teaching after they leave the military. And what we found was that teachers or these soldiers, or I'll say service members because they're not all soldiers, but these service members who are willing to go to inner city schools actually get paid more because they're trying to get more teachers into these schools. So what happens is often many teachers who are not African American will go teach at an African American school because they're going to get paid a little bit more.
Oh.
So yeah, so we find what we'll find is that we'll have teachers who who don't always identify with the students at these inner city schools,
Right.
but they're there because they have to do a certain amount of time there, and
Right.
they're getting paid a little bit more.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. It's all kinds of things going on
Yeah.
under the surface, behind the scenes, unspoken things. Part of the structural racism that you were talking about is not the one thing. It's the whole, it's all the moving parts of the thing. You know, of the system. It's not just one thing that you can,
Right.
if you could just fix one thing, you still got the other 50 things that are still creating problems.
It's woven in the fabric of our country, and it's working the way it was designed to work. In terms of, if you living in structural racism, you can deny it all you want. There's no way you're not going to be affected. Those who are least affected are the most educated in it. Okay, for those who know their history, those who study their history, those who pass that history on to their students. Like the woman who my dear friend Jean King, she was very passionate about her students. And you don't belong in teaching unless you love children, unless you're a peaceful, joyful, and loving person. Why do you go into a profession that requires that of you?
Right. Right. You have to have patience too.
Right.
To be a teacher.
Absolutely. You
That's not one of my
you have
gifts.
to be creative. You have to be enthusiastic. We need to be more reflective. We don't go out there. A lot of times you can't expect kids to sit there and be interested in what you're teaching when you're not interested in it yourself. That comes across.
Absolutely.
That comes across.
Unfortunately, our time is coming to an end, but what I did want to point out, I love what you're saying, and I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about this program. Even if you don't have the same background as the students that you're teaching, I think it's important as a teacher to learn, take the time to learn about these students' background, get to know these students, because you'll be able to identify with them a lot better, no matter what color you are. If you take time to actually get to know these students and figure out how they learn, how they're going to respond, I believe that you will get a much better outcome.
Absolutely. Relationship is key.
Yes.
That's absolutely key to being, to reaching students the way we need to reach them. Not only academically, but their well-being, just their self-esteem.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now we actually can talk a little bit longer because our next guest, he was in the waiting room and then he left. So we have a little bit more time with Mary, and we can hear more because we didn't get to hear about where the book was available.
Okay.
And do you just have the one book?
Yes, the one book for now.
Okay.
We'll see
For
how well my book is in several libraries as we speak. It's in several libraries. But it's Wisdom Warriors, wisdomwarriors2020.com is my website.
Okay.
To purchase the book. Once again, it's wisdomwarriors2020.com.
Okay, and it's Wisdom Warriors with an S, right?
Wisdom Warriors.
Warriors is plural.
Yes. With an S.
2020.
Yeah, Wisdom Warriors. Yes.
Okay, and also you're on Facebook and Instagram under Wisdom Warriors.
Instagram is at Wisdom Warriors 2020.
Okay.
Or at I Am a Wisdom Warrior.
Okay. And you also have a YouTube channel, looks like, or YouTube video.
Well, I did a YouTube for a library had me reading a story. So if you go to my website, there's a story on reading that I read for a library that I attached to the website, so you can listen to that story as a teaser.
Okay. All
Okay.
right. Well, Mary, you are a blessing. You remind me of my favorite teacher that I had in 4th, 5th, and 7th grade. Mrs. I.B. Edwards. She kept moving. She moved when I moved, and then she went to 7th grade. She was the best teacher. She didn't take any stuff from the kids. She was tough, tough, tough. But she was my very favorite teacher, and she was committed, like you are. She was very committed to education and was teaching reading until she was 80 or 90 years old. So I can't see that. I can't see the phone. I can't see what it says. You have to tell me what it says,
Well,
Rhonda.
I'm just showing I followed your page.
Oh, okay.
Wisdom Warriors 2020.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's like showing
Yeah, I know,
like
it's a little
license.
glare.
It comes across with a glare.
Oh, wait, that was
Okay.
Michelle Obama.
Well, our next guest is in the waiting room now. So we really appreciate you coming on, and much success with your book and whatever you're doing with education. You're retired now from teaching, or you still doing something?
No, I'm retired right now. I'm on the Rape Crisis Board, and I'm quite busy actually. But
Okay.
I stopped teaching 2 years ago and decided to write the book.
Okay.
Well, congratulations on all you're doing, and thank you for what you're doing with our young children.
Right, and thank you for sharing.
And thank you for having me.
Okay,
Good night.
you're welcome.